Hello everyone. Enjoy these relaxing moments while you watch a beautiful slay queen dump her poor boyfriend for a rich playboy. Years later, she fell to her knees when she met the billionaire CEO of her new job. The store clerk held out the bag, a slender black and gold creation cradled delicately in his gloved hands. John glanced at it nervously, examining every corner, every stitch, as if trying to ensure the bag was worth its price. He'd saved for weeks, working late into the night, often sacrificing things like takeout and weekend plans just to make this moment possible. It wasn't a Louis Vuitton, but it was still a designer handbag, the best he could afford. As the clerk wrapped it carefully, John felt a surge of excitement. He could picture Bella's reaction when she saw it, the spark in her eyes, the way her smile would light up. She'd been talking about a new bag for months, hinting at how she'd love a Louis Vuitton like the ones her friends carried. This wasn't that exact bag, but it was close enough to make her happy, he thought. Pocketing the receipt, he left the store and headed back to his car. The bag felt almost like a symbol, a promise that he could give her a future filled with the things she deserved. He knew his business wasn't bringing in much money now, but he was on the verge of something big. He could feel it. Bella had been patient with him. She'd given up nights out, fancy dinners, even a few vacations. She was worth every sacrifice, every effort. The drive home was a mix of nerves and anticipation. As he pulled up to their small apartment, he carefully adjusted the bag's packaging, double-checking that the bow was tied perfectly. Taking a deep breath, he walked up the stairs, imagining how she'd react. Bella was lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone, her fingers adorned with rings and bracelets that caught the light. She looked up as he entered, raising an eyebrow in mild surprise. "Hey, you're home early," she said, her tone indifferent. Her gaze flickered to the bag in his hand, and he caught the quick glint of curiosity in her eyes. "What's that?" John smiled, feeling his excitement build. "I wanted to surprise you. I know you've been talking about a new bag, so I thought I'd get you something special." Her eyes lit up for a brief moment, a glimmer of the reaction he'd been hoping for. She set down her phone and took the bag from him, untying the ribbon with a careful, deliberate touch. But as she pulled the black and gold bag from its wrap, her expression shifted, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Kate Spade?" she asked, her voice a mix of surprise and disappointment. She held the bag up, examining it as if it were a counterfeit. "John, you know I've been wanting a Louis Vuitton." He felt a pang in his chest, his smile faltering. "I know, Bella, and I promise you I'll get you one as soon as I can. This was what I could afford right now." Bella let out a quiet sigh, her face unreadable as she set the bag back down on the table. "John, I can't be seen with this. I mean, Kate Spade? It's practically basic. I've worked too hard to look cheap." John tried to keep his voice steady, swallowing the hurt that was creeping up. "Bella, it's just a bag, and it's temporary. Once the business takes off, I'll be able to get you anything you want, even a whole collection of bags." "Your business," she repeated, an edge of sarcasm in her tone. She shook her head, a frustrated laugh escaping her. "John, you've been saying that for a year now. Once the business takes off, do you know how many times I've heard that? Meanwhile, I'm supposed to walk around with a Kate Spade bag like it's the best I can get?" He clenched his jaw, fighting to stay calm. "Bella, I'm doing everything I can. I'm working late, I'm saving, I'm sacrificing everything to build something for us. But these things take time. I just want you to believe in me." Bella crossed her arms, her gaze hardening. "Believe in you? I'm sorry, but I can't live on faith alone. Look, maybe your dream is enough for you, but it's not enough for me. I want more than this, John. I want a life that's bigger, more glamorous. I want to be taken seriously." "Bella, please," he said, reaching for her hand. "This is just the beginning. If you stick with me, I'll be able to give you all of that. I just need a little more time." But she pulled her hand back, standing up and shaking her head. "Time, John? I don't think time is going to change anything. This business of yours, this idea you're so obsessed with, it's never going to give me the life I want." The words hit him like a slap, and he felt a numbness settle in his chest. He wanted to say something to make her understand how much she meant to him, but the look in her eyes told him that she was already too far gone. After a moment, Bella let out a long sigh and picked up her phone again, her tone shifting to one of disinterest. "Anyway, I'm starving. Let's just go get something to eat." He blinked, thrown off by the sudden change. "Where do you want to go?" She didn't look up from her phone. "I'm craving steak and wine. Something nice." John hesitated, the realization sinking in that this dinner would likely cost more than the bag he just bought. "I was actually thinking we could do something a little more affordable tonight. How about Denny's?" Bella looked up, her expression incredulous. "Denny's? Are you kidding me, John? You're going to take a girl who looks like this to Denny's for dinner?" "Bella, come on," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "It's just one night. I promise, once the business—" "There you go again with the business," she snapped, her voice rising. "I'm so tired of hearing about this big idea of yours that's supposed to magically make everything better. You know what? Maybe it's time you started acting like a man instead of a dreamer. I need someone who can actually take care of me, not keep asking me to wait." She grabbed her purse and stood up, walking toward the door without another word. John followed, feeling a strange numbness take over as they headed to his old car, the one he'd had since college, the one she'd always complained about. As he unlocked the car, he glanced over at her, hoping for some sign of understanding. "Bella, just try to see things from my side. Please, I'm doing everything I can." She rolled her eyes, sliding into the passenger seat. "Honestly, John, I just wish you'd stop acting like a loser. Maybe if you actually got rid of this junky car and did something real with your life, things would be different." The drive to the restaurant was silent, with John gripping the steering wheel tightly, his mind reeling. Her words echoed in his head, each one cutting deeper than the last. This wasn't how he pictured his future with her. He'd imagined a life where they'd support each other, where they'd grow together. But now, as he glanced over at her with her cold expression and crossed arms, he wondered if he'd been fooling himself all along. In that moment, he realized just how wide the gap between them had grown, and he couldn't shake the feeling that no amount of success could bridge it. The neon sign flickered faintly above the diner's door as John parked the car. Stepping out into the warm evening, he looked over at Bella, hoping that once they were inside, the cozy atmosphere would lighten the mood. Denny's wasn't glamorous, but it was familiar, comforting, the kind of place where he could unwind, where they could talk without any pressure. But as he opened the door for her, Bella's face twisted in visible distaste. She glanced around at the red vinyl booths, the laminated menus, and the soft hum of the kitchen. "You're serious?" she whispered, leaning close so only he could hear. "John, this place is sad." "Bella, come on," he replied, forcing a smile. "It's just one meal. It's not about the place, it's about us, right?" She rolled her eyes, muttering under her breath. "I just can't believe you'd bring me somewhere like this." He ignored her comment, leading her to a booth near the window. As they sat down, he took her hand, giving it a light squeeze. "Bella, I know things aren't perfect right now, but I just want us to be together without all the—" "Without all the what, John?" she interrupted, pulling her hand back. "Without the good things in life? Without actually living? It's like you don't even care how this all looks." A waitress approached, holding a worn notebook. "Hi there, what can I get you folks tonight?" Bella barely glanced at the menu before closing it sharply. "I'll just have a salad," she said, her voice tight. The waitress nodded, jotting it down. "And for you?" "I'll have the usual, thanks," John replied with a polite smile. The waitress smiled back, recognizing him from his late-night work breaks. Bella noticed the exchange, her expression souring. After the waitress left, John turned his attention back to Bella, who sat staring out the window, arms crossed. "Bella, look, I know this isn't exactly what you had in mind for dinner, but this is temporary. Soon we'll have the life we want, the one you deserve. You just have to trust me. Meanwhile, I'm supposed to act like it doesn't matter that my friends are living real lives, traveling, wearing nice things. You don't get it, do you?" His jaw tightened as he tried to keep his voice steady. "I do get it. But the thing is, Bella, I'm not Estefan or any of those guys. I don't come from money. I have to earn it." She shook her head, her eyes narrowing. "That's exactly the problem. You're too busy being noble and idealistic. This business idea of yours, do you even know if it's going to work, or are you just wasting time? John clenched his fist beneath the table, frustration boiling under his skin. He'd poured his heart and soul into his business, endured countless late nights and endless rejections. Of course I know it'll work. I just need some time to build it, that's all. Success doesn't happen overnight. Bella scoffed, folding her arms. You know, I'm not so sure. Maybe I was just hoping for something more than this. The waitress returned, setting their plates down with a small smile, but Bella didn't even acknowledge her, pushing her salad around with her fork instead. John noticed the way she picked at the lettuce, her gaze distant and cold. You know, he began, his voice barely a whisper, it wouldn't kill you to believe in me, Bella. I'm trying to build something here, something real for us. Bella looked up, her expression unchanging. You think I don't believe in you, John? I did at first. But how long am I supposed to wait for you to get your act together? My friends, they're not waiting around for someone else to give them a good life. They have it already. Then why are you with me? He asked, his voice soft but steady. All you care about is keeping up with them. Then why stay with me? The question seemed to hang in the air, and for a moment he thought he saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. She looked away, her voice quieter now, almost hesitant. Because I thought maybe you'd grow out of this dream, that you'd settle down and realize that we need more than hope to survive. John took a deep breath, forcing himself to keep calm. Bella, if I give up now, I'd never forgive myself. This dream is what drives me. I want a future that we built together, one that we can look back on and be proud of. Don't you want that too? She didn't answer. Instead, she stared down at her plate, an unreadable expression crossing her face. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the faint clinking of dishes and the hum of conversation from other tables. The waitress came by to refill their water glasses, sensing the tension and making a quick retreat. Finally, Bella broke the silence, her voice soft but laced with bitterness. John, I need more. I need a life that isn't built on promises. His heart sank as he watched her, realizing that her words were more than just frustration. There was a finality to them, a sense that she'd already decided what she wanted, and it wasn't him. Taking a shaky breath, John tried one last time to bridge the gap between them. Bella, please. I love you, and I'm doing everything I can to make this work. I know it's not easy right now, but if you could just give me a little more time. But she shook her head, cutting him off. John, love isn't enough. Not for me. Those words hit him harder than any argument, cutting through him with a cold finality. She didn't look at him as she said them, her gaze fixed on the table as if she couldn't bear to meet his eyes. The check arrived and John quietly paid for their meal, the warmth and excitement he'd felt earlier replaced by a hollow ache. Bella didn't offer a word of thanks or acknowledgement as they left, her silence speaking volumes. As they walked to the car, the tension between them thickened, each step feeling heavier than the last. They got in, and John gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. He felt like he was losing her, like he'd been trying to hold on to someone who was already slipping away. The drive home was silent, filled only with the low hum of the engine and the distant sounds of the city outside. He stole glances at her now and then, hoping to see some hint of understanding, some trace of the girl he'd fallen in love with. But her expression remained unreadable, her gaze fixed on the road ahead as if she were already miles away. When they reached the apartment, she got out without a word, her heels clicking on the pavement as she walked ahead of him. He followed her up the stairs, feeling a growing sense of dread, a quiet certainty that something had shifted irreparably between them. As they reached the door, Bella stopped, turning to look at him with an expression that was cold, almost detached. John, I think I need some time to think things over. Maybe I just need space. The words hung in the air, filling him with a deep, gnawing sadness. He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat, knowing that arguing wouldn't change her mind. I understand, he managed, his voice barely above a whisper. She turned and walked into the apartment, leaving him standing in the doorway, feeling more alone than he'd ever felt in his life. John stood in front of the small jewelry store, clutching the velvet box in his hand. Inside was a modest ring, a delicate band with a small diamond, something he'd chosen carefully with Bella in mind. He knew it wasn't a showstopper, not the kind of ring she probably dreamed of, but it was what he could afford. To him, it held all the love he'd ever felt for her. It was a promise, a vow to give her a future, and he wanted her to know just how much she meant to him. As he opened the door to their apartment, he found Bella in front of the mirror, adjusting the strap on her red dress, her gaze intent on her reflection. Her outfit was elegant and carefully put together, each piece a statement of the life she aspired to. John's heart swelled with pride and love. Tonight, he was going to make her his fiancée. "Hey babe," he said, his voice warm. Bella turned to look at him, noticing the faint glimmer of excitement in his eyes. "Hey, yourself," she replied with a small, distracted smile. "You're in a good mood." "Well, I've got a surprise for you," he said, his hand slipping into his pocket. Her eyes lit up with curiosity, and he felt his heart racing. This was it. Taking a deep breath, he dropped to one knee, holding up the box to reveal the ring. Bella's expression froze, and for a moment he thought he saw a flicker of something like fear in her eyes. "Bella," he began, his voice unsteady but filled with hope, "we've been together for almost a year now, and you mean everything to me. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" The silence that followed was suffocating. Bella stared down at the ring, her mouth set in a hard line, her eyes narrowing. Her gaze drifted to the small, glittering diamond, and her lips pressed together in a thin, unimpressed line. What is that?" she asked, her voice low and strained. He blinked, momentarily thrown off. "An engagement ring for you, Bella." She let out a dry, humorless laugh. "An engagement ring?" Her eyes fixed on the stone. "John, this isn't even a 2-carat diamond. It's tiny. They'll think I'm marrying someone who can't even afford a decent ring." His heart sank, the excitement and hope draining from his face. "Bella, it's all I could afford right now. But I promise, this is just the beginning. Once the business takes off, I'll get you a bigger ring. The one you deserve." Her expression darkened. "John, I don't want promises. I want results. I can't go around showing this tiny, embarrassing diamond to my friends. Do you know how much they'll laugh at me?" He felt like he'd been punched in the stomach, the weight of her words hitting him like a ton of bricks. "Bella, this isn't about what other people think. It's about us, our commitment. I love you, and I want to build a life with you." She shook her head, crossing her arms. "Maybe that's enough for you, John, but it's not enough for me. I don't want a life of waiting, a life of maybe someday. I deserve more." His heart clenched as he looked at her, seeing not the girl he thought he loved, but a stranger with cold, hard eyes, someone he barely recognized. "Bella, I'm giving you everything I have. I know it's not much right now, but if you could just believe in me." "Believe in you?" she sneered, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "John, I've been doing that for too long. And what have I gotten out of it? A cheap purse and a tiny diamond?" The words stung, and for the first time he felt a surge of anger, of indignation. "Bella, do you even care about me, or do you only care about what I can give you?" She paused, and for a brief second he thought he saw a flicker of guilt. But then her expression hardened again, her voice cool and detached. "John, I need someone who can give me the life I want, the life I deserve. If you can't do that, maybe we shouldn't be together." He felt a chill run down his spine, his stomach twisting. Are you saying you're leaving me?" She sighed, glancing down at her phone as if the conversation were nothing more than an inconvenience. "John, I've been thinking about this for a while. Maybe it's better if we both go our separate ways." The words hung in the air, filling him with a hollow, numbing ache. He couldn't believe this was happening. He thought they were in this together, that they were building something real. But now, as he looked into her eyes, he realized she'd already made up her mind. But I love you, Bella," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought we were going to have a future together." She glanced away, avoiding his gaze. "Love isn't enough, John. Not for me." He felt a wave of bitterness rising within him, a sense of betrayal that left him reeling. "So that's it, then? You're just walking away?" She didn't respond, her silence speaking volumes. He felt a crushing sense of loss, of despair, as he watched her turn and walk toward the door, her heels clicking against the floor. She paused briefly, glancing over her shoulder with a faint, cold smile. "Good luck with your business, John," she said, her tone laced with disdain. "Maybe someday it'll actually take off." And with that, she walked out, leaving him alone in the quiet, empty room, the ring still clutched in his trembling hand. Later that night, the emptiness of the apartment was suffocating. The silence pressed down on him, thick and heavy, amplifying every stray thought, every lingering doubt. John sat alone on the edge of the couch, staring down at the ring in his hand, feeling the weight of everything he'd lost. He replayed the moment over and over in his mind, her words echoing in his head like a cruel, mocking refrain. She had rejected not just the ring, but everything he'd offered her, his love, his dreams, his future. To her, they were nothing more than disappointments and unfulfilled promises. A part of him wanted to scream, to lash out, to tell her she'd made a mistake. But the other part, the part that was drowning in heartbreak, couldn't summon the energy. He felt drained, hollow, as if everything he'd believed in had been stripped away. As the night wore on, he sat in the dim light of the apartment, the ring glinting faintly in his hand. Slowly, he closed the box, setting it aside with a heavy sigh. The door opened softly, and his best friend Mark walked in, his eyes filled with concern. Mark had known John for years, had seen him through the highs and lows, and he immediately noticed the hollow look in John's eyes. "John, are you okay?" Mark asked, sitting down beside him. John let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "No, Mark. I'm not okay." He told Mark everything. The proposal, Bella's reaction, the way she'd walked out without a second thought. Mark listened quietly, a sympathetic look on his face. "John, I know it hurts now, but maybe this is for the best. Bella never really saw you for who you are. She only saw what you could give her." John sighed, running a hand through his hair. "But I thought if I worked hard enough, if I gave her everything, she'd finally see me. She'd finally be proud of me." Mark placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "John, you don't need someone who's only proud of you when you're successful. You need someone who's with you through the tough times. Someone who believes in you even when things aren't perfect." John nodded slowly, the words sinking in. It was a bitter truth, one he hadn't been ready to face. But as he sat there, the weight of the ring pressing against his hand, he realized that maybe Mark was right. Maybe it was time to let go of the dream he'd been holding on to, the dream of a life with Bella. "Thanks, Mark," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. I think I needed to hear that." As Mark left, John sat in the silence once more, a sense of quiet determination settling over him. Bella was gone, but he still had his dream, his business, his vision for the future. And for the first time in a long time, he realized that he didn't need anyone's approval to make it happen. Taking a deep breath, he stood up, putting the ring back in its box and setting it aside. Tomorrow, he would dive back into his work, giving everything he had to the business he'd built with his own hands. He would prove, not to Bella or anyone else, but to himself, that he was capable of achieving something real, something lasting. And maybe, just maybe, he would find someone who saw him for who he was, not for what he could give. John woke up the next morning feeling a heaviness that hadn't been there before. The empty side of the bed seemed to mock him, a reminder of all he'd poured into a relationship that had turned out to be as fragile as the promises Bella had discarded. But there was something else, too, something faint but steady beneath the ache, resolve. He sat up, glancing at the ring box on the nightstand. He'd wanted to give her everything, a life they'd build together, a future filled with happiness and achievement. Now, looking at the ring, he felt both sadness and a strange sense of relief. Maybe Mark was right. Maybe this was his chance to focus on what mattered most. It was time to stop chasing Bella's approval. He didn't need anyone's validation to be successful. He dressed quickly, pulling on his jacket and grabbing his keys, feeling a new kind of energy pulse through him. Today, he'd focus on his business, the one he'd built piece by piece, hour by hour. Bella may not have believed in him, but he believed in himself. As he walked into the small shared office he'd been renting, his partner and co-founder, Kevin, glanced up, noticing the shift in John's demeanor immediately. "Hey man," Kevin said, eyeing him carefully. "You look different. Are you okay?" John gave a short nod, setting his bag down on the desk. "Yeah, I am, actually. I'm ready to go all in." Kevin raised an eyebrow. "You sure? I mean, I thought Bella was—" "Well, Bella's not here anymore," John interrupted, his tone steady. "She left. She wants something different. But I'm not going to let that stop me. This business is everything to me, and I'm ready to give it everything I've got." A slow smile spread across Kevin's face. He'd always believed in John's vision and the potential of the product they were creating together. They'd spent countless late nights planning, brainstorming, and working through the challenges of a startup. "Then let's make it happen, John." They dove into the day with a renewed sense of purpose, refining their product, reaching out to potential clients, and setting up meetings. Every task became a goal, every goal a step toward proving his worth to himself. With Bella gone, there was no need to worry about impressing anyone else. The days turned into weeks, and John poured everything into his work. As his focus sharpened, so did the business. Slowly but surely, they began gaining momentum. A few investors started taking notice, and clients began returning their calls. Their product, a digital tool designed to streamline workflows for small businesses, was beginning to catch attention, particularly from small and mid-sized firms. For the first time, John could see a real path to success, one not defined by his relationship but by his own determination. Meanwhile, Bella's life with Estefan. While John was throwing himself into his work, Bella had moved in with Estefan, the wealthy boyfriend she'd been seeing behind John's back. Estefan was everything she thought she wanted: confident, successful, and, most importantly, rich. He showered her with gifts, designer clothes, fine jewelry, and weekends away at luxurious resorts. At first, Bella was elated. The life she dreamed of was finally within her grasp. She enjoyed showing off her new lifestyle to friends, posting photos online of the places they went, the clothes she wore, and the glamorous dinners she attended. But over time, a sense of unease began to creep in. Esteban's gifts, which once felt like a dream come true, started to feel transactional. There was always an expectation, a sense that she owed him for every luxurious meal, every handbag, every pair of shoes. She was beginning to realize that Estefan didn't see her as a partner, but more as an accessory, someone to accompany him and add to his image. She noticed that his gaze often wandered, landing on other women who were younger, flashier, more exciting. Bella tried to brush it off, but the feeling gnawed at her, growing stronger each time he left her alone at a party or looked past her to admire someone else. Months passed, and John's business was finally starting to take off. He and Kevin had landed their first major client, a mid-size firm that signed a 6-month contract to use their software. It was a game changer, the validation they'd been working toward for so long. The day the contract was signed, John felt a surge of pride and excitement that he'd never known before. The joy was pure, unmarred by anyone else's expectations or demands. This was his success, a milestone he'd earned through his own grit and resilience. Mark and Kevin convinced him to celebrate, taking him out to a small but cozy bar. That night, John couldn't stop smiling, the sense of accomplishment filling every part of him. He was finally achieving something real, something lasting. Raising his glass, he made a quiet toast to himself. To moving forward, he murmured, feeling the weight of those words settle into his heart. One evening, Bella arrived at Estefan's apartment to find him chatting with another woman, a striking brunette who looked like she belonged in a high-fashion magazine. They were laughing, their conversation filled with a familiarity that made Bella's stomach twist. "Bella," Estefan said, looking only mildly surprised as she walked in. He didn't introduce the woman. Instead, he poured a glass of wine and handed it to Bella as if nothing were amiss. That night, as they sat in silence over dinner, she realized that Estefan didn't love her. To him, she was simply another item to flaunt, just like his car, his watch, his apartment. She remembered John's modest proposal, his heartfelt promise that they'd build a life together. In that moment, a pang of regret struck her, sharp and painful. She had traded loyalty and kindness for glitz, and now it felt hollow. After dinner, she scrolled through her old photos with John, looking at the simpler moments they'd shared: movie nights, long talks about the future, quiet mornings over coffee. There had been a warmth, a sincerity, a feeling of safety with him that Estefan's riches couldn't replicate. On the night of his first major business milestone, John met someone new. Her name was Rose, a friend of Kevin's who'd come along to celebrate. She was warm and down to earth, with a genuine smile that made him feel at ease. They talked for hours about everything from their families to their dreams, and he found himself laughing in a way he hadn't in a long time. Rose listened intently as he told her about his business, her eyes lighting up with interest and encouragement. "You're really building something amazing," she said, her voice full of admiration. "That's inspiring, John. It takes a lot of courage to pursue your dreams like that." Her words filled him with a new sense of confidence, a belief that his efforts were not only valid but valuable. Rose wasn't there for what he could give her, she was interested in who he was. Over the following weeks, they began spending more time together. Rose would bring him lunch at the office or stop by with homemade cookies when he worked late. She didn't expect anything flashy or expensive. Her gestures were small but sincere, thoughtful in a way that touched him deeply. John found himself thinking about her often, marveling at how effortlessly she fit into his life. With her, there was no pressure, no expectation, just the simple pleasure of being with someone who truly cared. As the weeks went by, Bella began to notice Estefan's indifference more acutely. Their relationship was transactional, each gift a silent reminder that she was just another possession. She missed John's kindness, the way he'd supported her, the patience he'd shown despite her harsh words. One afternoon, while walking through a luxury mall, she saw a couple laughing together over coffee, their hands entwined as they shared a pastry. The scene was simple, unadorned, yet something about it struck her deeply. It reminded her of the small, everyday moments she'd had with John, moments she'd taken for granted. It wasn't long before Bella found herself checking John's social media, scrolling through his recent updates. She was surprised to see a photo of him with a new woman, her warm smile unmistakable. The caption read, "Celebrating milestones with someone who believes in me." Bella's heart sank as she realized the depth of what she had lost. For the first time, Bella understood that she had given up something real, something precious, in pursuit of a life that now felt meaningless. Months had passed since Bella had last seen John. Her life with Estefan had seemed like a dream at first, one filled with luxury, expensive dinners, and glamorous parties. But the dream soured when she discovered she was pregnant. She'd been nervous yet excited, imagining that this news might bring her and Estefan closer, solidifying their future together. One evening, as they sat in his sleek penthouse, Bella took a deep breath and broke the news. "Estefan," she began, trying to keep her voice steady. I'm pregnant." He looked up from his phone, his eyes narrowing as if he wasn't sure he'd heard her right. "Pregnant?" he repeated, a cold smile playing at his lips. "Yes," she said, forcing a small smile, hoping he'd react with joy or at least acceptance. But Estefan only laughed, a dry, mirthless sound that sent a chill through her. "You think I'm interested in a kid?" he said, setting his drink down with a careless clink. "Do you think I'm some kind of family man?" Tone was harsh and his words sliced through her hopes. "Estefan, I thought," she trailed off, trying to catch his eye, to make him see how much this meant to her. "I thought this would be a good thing. I thought maybe—" "Thought what?" he interrupted, his voice sharp. "That I'd throw a celebration? Make an honest woman out of you?" He laughed again, a cold, biting sound. "Bella, I have no interest in playing house with you. This," he motioned toward her with a dismissive wave, "isn't what I signed up for." A knot of dread twisted in her stomach. "So, what are you saying?" "I'm saying you're on your own," he replied, his eyes narrowing. "Get rid of it or find somewhere else to live. You're not my problem anymore." Her heart sank as he turned back to his phone, dismissing her with a flick of his hand. She felt a burning in her chest, a sense of betrayal so sharp it left her breathless. She had thought he cared about her or at least respected her, but his gaze, detached and unfeeling, told her everything she needed to know. Without another word, she gathered her things, stumbling out of the penthouse with tears blurring her vision. She had no family to turn to, no friends left who hadn't faded away when she'd entered Estefan's world. Alone, with nothing but a small suitcase and the clothes on her back, Bella felt a cold dread settling over her. Days passed in a daze of loneliness and fear. She tried to reach out to people she had once known, but doors were closed and calls unanswered. Her desperation grew. Finally, she thought of John. She remembered the gentle way he'd once held her hand, the patience in his eyes, his promises to support her no matter what. A flicker of hope stirred inside her. Clutching her phone, she dialed his number, her heart pounding as she waited. But after a few rings, a recording answered. "The number you are trying to reach is no longer in service." She tried again, her hands trembling, but each time, the same message played. Desperate, she decided to visit his old apartment. The landlady, an older woman with kind eyes, opened the door when Bella knocked. "Hello, I'm looking for John. Does he still live here?" The woman's face softened with a look of pity. "John? Oh, honey, he moved out a while ago. Bought himself a nice place, I heard. I'd say he's done well for himself." Bella's heart sank. "Oh, do you know where he lives now or how I can reach him?" The landlady shook her head, a sad smile on her face. "Sorry, dear. But I'll tell you, he was a good man, that John. If you're looking for kindness, he had it in spades." Bella forced a smile, but her throat felt tight as she murmured her thanks and walked away. She was alone again, more lost than ever. Her days turned into a monotonous cycle of searching for work, facing rejection after rejection. She had no degree, no job experience, and now that her pregnancy was beginning to show, her options seemed even fewer. Then one day, as she wandered the city, she overheard two women chatting near a cafe. "Did you hear JNR Tech is hiring cleaners?" one of them said, looking at a job listing on her phone. "It's a big company, and the pay's supposed to be decent." Bella felt a surge of hope. She'd heard of them. They were one of the city's most successful tech companies. Cleaning wasn't what she had imagined for herself, but it was something. It would be enough to help her survive, to keep her going, maybe even allow her to start over. The next day, she gathered her last bit of courage and arrived at JNR's headquarters. The sleek, glass-walled building towered above her, intimidating and beautiful. She took a deep breath, then walked inside, heading to the front desk. "Hi, I'm here for the cleaning position," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The receptionist gave her a polite nod, directing her to the HR office down the hall. Bella walked slowly, her heart pounding as she entered the office and sat down for her interview. The HR manager, a middle-aged woman named Linda with graying hair and sharp eyes, looked at her over her glasses. "You understand this job requires punctuality and attention to detail?" Linda asked, her voice firm. "Yes, ma'am," Bella replied, trying to sound confident. "I'm ready to start right away." Linda's eyes softened slightly. "I appreciate your eagerness, but remember, this job isn't easy. You'll be expected to work long hours, and it can be, exhausting." Bella nodded, her voice shaking as she replied, "I'll do whatever it takes." Linda studied her for a moment before nodding. "All right, report here tomorrow morning, and we'll get you started." Bella exhaled a breath of relief. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. Later that night, as she lay on a worn mattress in the small, dingy room she was now renting, she thought about John. She remembered the kind look in his eyes, his promises, his hopes. A part of her longed to reach out to him again, to beg for his forgiveness. But she knew it was a door she'd closed long ago. The following morning, Bella arrived at JNR Tech in her new uniform, a plain gray shirt and dark slacks. She kept her head down, pushing her cleaning cart from one office to the next, scrubbing floors, emptying trash cans, and wiping down desks. She was careful, making sure each room looked spotless before moving on to the next. Hours passed in silence, her mind focused on the rhythm of her work. Finally, she reached the top floor where the executive suites were located. A receptionist looked up as Bella approached. "You must be the new cleaner," the receptionist said with a polite smile. "The last office down the hall is the CEO's." He's out of the building, so you've got about 15 minutes to get it done. Bella nodded, pushing her cart down the corridor. The door at the end was marked simply with U. She took a deep breath, steeling herself as she opened the door and stepped inside. The room was grand, almost intimidating. Floor-to-ceiling windows lined one wall, offering a sweeping view of the city below. The furniture was sleek and modern, the surfaces polished and pristine. Bella felt a strange sense of reverence as she moved through the space, careful not to touch anything she didn't have to. She worked in silence, wiping down the glass table, dusting the shelves, and emptying the small wastebasket beside the desk. Her gaze drifted to a framed photo sitting neatly at the edge of the desk, and she froze. It was a picture of John, smiling in a suit and tie, looking every bit the confident, successful businessman. Her heart raced as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. John here? As the CEO? She stood there, her mind spinning, when she heard the door click open behind her. She turned slowly, her eyes widening as she saw him, John, standing in the doorway, a mix of surprise and disbelief in his gaze. Bella, he said, his voice calm but edged with shock. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him as he took in the sight of her in the cleaner's uniform, her hands still resting on his desk. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence thick with unspoken words. Finally, Bella found her voice, though it was barely more than a whisper. John, I didn't know. He raised an eyebrow, folding his arms as he regarded her. Didn't know what? She felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. I didn't know that you were the CEO of this company. John's lips twisted into a faint, humorless smile. I'm sure you didn't. He paused, his gaze flickering over her, taking in the worn uniform and the tired look in her eyes. And you? Working here as a cleaner? Her throat tightened. Yes, she managed, her voice shaking. I needed the job. He watched her in silence, his expression unreadable. I see, he said finally, his tone calm but distant. She took a shaky breath, fighting the urge to look away. John, I don't know what to say. He let out a quiet sigh, his gaze softening slightly. There's really nothing to say, Bella. The past is the past. She looked down, feeling the weight of her choices pressing down on her. I'm sorry, she whispered. For everything. Bella stood frozen in John's office, feeling the full weight of her choices as they hung heavily between them. Just as the silence was beginning to stretch unbearably, the door opened, and Rose walked in, holding a folder in one hand and a coffee in the other. She paused mid-step, noticing the tension in the room. Oh, am I interrupting something? Rose asked, her gaze shifting between John and Bella. Bella quickly lowered her eyes, muttering, "Excuse me," before hurrying out. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving Rose standing in the center of the room, her gaze fixed on John. What was that about? She asked, setting the coffee down on his desk. John let out a long, exhausted sigh and sank into his chair. That was Bella, he said, his voice quieter than usual. The one I told you about. The one who left me because I wasn't successful enough. Rose's eyes widened in shock, her hand moving to her mouth. She's working here, as a cleaner? John replied, a mixture of disbelief and bitterness in his tone. Apparently, life hasn't turned out the way she planned. Rose shook her head, trying to process what he just said. I can't believe it. After everything she did to you, what is she doing here? John looked away, his gaze hardening. I don't know. But part of me thinks it serves her right. Rose looked at him carefully, then placed a hand gently on his shoulder. John, I understand why you feel that way, but she's pregnant, and she's clearly struggling. You've built an amazing life and career for yourself, and she's been left with nothing. Maybe you should help her? John scoffed, crossing his arms. Help her? After what she did to me? Rose looked at him, her gaze compassionate but firm. John, I know it hurts, but sometimes we have to let go of the pain and not repay evil with evil. Think of what kind of person you are now, and what kind of person you want to be. He sat silently, her words chipping away at his resentment. After a long moment, he looked back at her, seeing only kindness in her eyes. He exhaled a defeated breath. You really think I should help her? Rose nodded. I do. She's clearly at rock bottom, and you have the power to make things better for her, even if it's just a small gesture. Finally, he relented. All right, I'll talk to her. But only because you're asking me to. The following afternoon, Bella sat in the crowded company cafeteria, nervously stirring her coffee, her mind racing. She hadn't expected John to work here, let alone be the CEO. Her entire existence felt turned upside down, and she was struggling to process the reality she now faced. Suddenly, she looked up and saw John approaching, carrying his own coffee. He nodded to the seat across from her. Mind if I sit? She shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. No, please. They sat in silence for a moment, neither one knowing quite where to start. Finally, John cleared his throat. Bella, what happened? Bella swallowed hard, staring into her coffee as she spoke. After I left you, I thought I'd found someone who could give me the life I wanted. But it was all an illusion. She took a shaky breath, fighting back tears. I got pregnant, and when I told him, he threw me out. Said I wasn't his problem anymore. John's expression remained impassive, but there was a faint glimmer of empathy in his eyes. And that's why you ended up here? She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. Yes. I've been trying to make things work, but it's been impossible. I have no degree, no job experience, and now I'm pregnant. I don't know what to do. She looked up, meeting his gaze, her voice filled with desperation. Please, John. I know I hurt you, and I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I don't know where else to turn. He looked at her for a long time, his expression unreadable. Slowly, he shook his head. I'm not going to fire you, Bella. Her eyes widened in relief, her hands clasped together in gratitude. Thank you, John. I'm so grateful. But he continued, the cleaning job isn't ideal for you right now, given your condition. She looked at him in confusion, a flicker of fear crossing her face. Please, I can do it. I don't mind. Just don't let me go. I'm not letting you go, he replied, his voice steady. I'm offering you a different job, as a secretary. It'll be less physically demanding, and you'll be able to manage with your pregnancy. Bella's eyes widened, her hands covering her mouth as she fought back a sob. Thank you. Thank you, John. I don't know how to thank you enough. He gave a slight nod, his tone calm but firm. Don't thank me. It wasn't my idea, it was Rose's. She's the one who convinced me to help. Just then, Rose entered the cafeteria, catching sight of them and making her way over. Bella's expression softened, and in a burst of gratitude, she dropped to her knees, clasping Rose's hands. Thank you, Bella whispered, her voice filled with emotion. Thank you for giving me another chance. Rose quickly helped her to her feet. You don't need to do that. Just make the most of this opportunity. Bella nodded, tears streaming down her face. As Rose and John walked away together, she watched them, a sense of deep regret settling in. Her mind reeled, and suddenly it dawned on her. The name of the company, J&R Tech, wasn't just some corporate acronym. John and Rose. She sank into a nearby chair, her heart heavy with realization. Tears fell freely as she recognized the full weight of her choices. She had given up someone who had loved her, and now he had found someone who truly appreciated him. And here she was, pregnant, broken, and alone. A few months later, J&R Tech celebrated its first anniversary. The company had grown rapidly, and John was now one of the city's most respected young CEOs. The event was grand, held in a ballroom filled with employees and investors, all eager to celebrate the success. Bella stood quietly near the back, watching as John took the stage. She tried to keep her emotions in check, her heart pounding as he began his speech. I want to thank everyone who has made this journey possible, John began, his voice warm and genuine. This company started as a dream that I shared with someone very special. Without her, none of this would have been possible. Bella felt her heart constrict, a brief flicker of hope rising within her. But as John's gaze drifted to Rose, who stood at the side of the stage, she felt the hope shatter. Rose, he said, holding out a hand to her. Would you join me up here? She stepped forward, a shy smile on her face as she took his hand. John looked out at the crowd, his voice filled with emotion. "Rose, you believed in me when no one else did. You stood by my side through everything, through every struggle, every setback, and because of you, we're here today." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. The crowd gasped as he opened it, revealing a stunning diamond ring that sparkled under the lights. He knelt before her, his voice steady and filled with love. "Rose, will you marry me?" Rose's hands flew to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes as she nodded, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, John. Yes, I will." The crowd erupted in cheers, the room filled with applause as they embraced and kissed, sealing their commitment to each other. Bella's vision blurred as she watched them, a hollow ache filling her chest. She had once dreamed of a life like this, of standing beside John as his partner, his equal. But that dream had slipped away, lost to her own choices and regrets. 2 weeks after the anniversary celebration, the city buzzed with excitement surrounding the grand wedding of John and Rose. Their love story had become the talk of both the corporate world and social circles, a testament to resilience, mutual respect, and unwavering support. The wedding had every detail meticulously planned, from towering floral arrangements to an elegant spread of gourmet cuisine and sparkling champagne. Guests poured into the cathedral that morning, some of the city's most influential figures, dressed to the nines, to witness the union of the JNR. The couple whose story had inspired many exchanged vows as Jin held Rose's hands tightly, his eyes shining with gratitude and love. They recited their promises with voices full of emotion, each word a testament to the journey they had walked together. Rose's gaze never left John's, her voice breaking slightly as she vowed to stand by him in both the triumphs and struggles of their future. When the officiant finally pronounced them husband and wife, the entire cathedral erupted into applause. They sealed their vows with a kiss, the beginning of their life as one. Meanwhile, across town, Bella was preparing to attend the wedding. She had dressed herself in a simple but elegant dress, determined to make amends by attending, a quiet gesture of respect and closure. Her hand rested on her growing belly as she looked in the mirror, wondering how it might feel to witness the love she had once walked away from. She took a deep breath, her heart heavy with both anticipation and regret. But just as she stepped out of her apartment, a sudden sharp pain struck her, doubling her over. Her gasp echoed in the hallway, her hands instinctively clutching her belly as a warm, unmistakable feeling washed over her. Her water had broken. Panicked, Bella looked around, unsure of what to do. Her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, who had always been there to help in times of need, saw her distress from across the hall and rushed over. "Bella, my dear, are you all right?" "Oh, you're in labor." Through labored breath, Bella nodded, gripping the wall for support. "Mrs. Thompson, I think the baby's coming." Mrs. Thompson didn't waste a second. She slipped her arm around Bella's shoulders, leading her carefully down the stairs and hailing a cab to take them to the nearest hospital. Bella clutched her belly, her heart racing with fear and a touch of sadness as she realized she wouldn't make it to John and Rose's wedding. Hours passed in the hospital as Bella endured the throes of labor. Through the pain, her thoughts drifted back to the ceremony she had missed, the vows she would never hear, the life she had once imagined with John that was now someone else's reality. But as her labor continued, her focus shifted entirely to the new life she was about to bring into the world. Finally, as the evening settled in, Bella heard the first cry of her newborn daughter, and a rush of love and relief flooded her heart. "Congratulations, Miss Bella," the nurse said softly, placing the swaddled baby girl in her arms. "You have a beautiful, healthy daughter." Tears filled Bella's eyes as she cradled her daughter close, her heart filling with a love so deep it seemed to wash away every hurt, every regret, at least for that moment. "Hello, my sweet girl," she whispered, brushing a kiss on her daughter's tiny forehead. "I promise you I'll do better. I'll be here for you." Just as Bella settled into her hospital room, exhausted but at peace, a knock sounded on the door. She looked up to see Jan and Rose standing in the doorway, still in their wedding attire. Rose looked radiant in her white gown, while John, dressed in a sleek tuxedo, held a bouquet of fresh flowers in his hands. "John Rose, what are you doing here?" Bella stammered, both surprised and touched by their visit. Rose smiled warmly, her eyes softening as she took in the sight of Bella with her newborn. "We heard you were here," she said gently, stepping forward. "We wanted to come and congratulate you on your beautiful daughter." Jin handed her the flowers, his gaze softening as he looked at the tiny bundle in Bella's arms. "She's precious, Bella," he said quietly, his voice sincere. "Congratulations. I'm really happy for you." Bella's eyes filled with tears as she looked from John to Rose, the weight of their kindness pressing down on her. "Thank you. Thank you both," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. Rose reached out, resting a gentle hand on Bella's shoulder. "Take care of yourself, Bella. And remember, if you ever need help, we're here." Bella nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude and a sense of closure. As she watched them turn to leave, she felt an odd sense of peace. It was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, one where she would focus on her daughter and the future they would build together. Jayen and Rose stepped out of the hospital room hand in hand, both feeling the weight of the moment they had just shared. As they left the building, John held Rose close, grateful for the life they were about to begin. Their limo was waiting to take them to the airport, where a private jet awaited, ready to whisk them away to a secluded island for their honeymoon. On the jet, as they took off into the night sky, Jin looked at Rose, his heart filled with a love and peace he had never known before. "Thank you, Rose," he murmured, kissing her hand. "For everything." Rose leaned her head on his shoulder, a soft smile playing on her lips. "We're just getting started, John. Here's to forever." As they soared into the clouds, leaving the city behind, both knew that they had finally found the life they had always dreamed of, together. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.